Well, hello there, everybody. We finally made it, didn't we? On the fourth Sunday, it should be the third Sunday. Welcome to our live stream, our monthly live stream. And last I checked, this is the month of March, although there's less of it than there used to be. So, first of all, I want to do a sound check. Let me know. Just give me you can hear whatever you can say to us to let us know that our audio's coming through loud and clear like it should, and everything is cool in that respect. So, yes, all right. Wonderful. Great. All right. Happy Sunday, happy March, and happy all that, and happy Edges, which I hope is going to be a good, a positive experience for you. Going to give Edges a really good going over today. Something that people either ignore or are confused about or don't see the use of and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully by the end of the day, or by the end of the hour, hopefully you will have an enthusiasm about the way you use your edges in your paintings. I sure hope so. Let's see who's there. There are folks are coming in. So hello to all of you: Serendipity, Cheryl, Penny, Barbara, Mary's art. Let's see what we got there. Barbara's got snow. That's Bobsy actually. Bobsy's got snow. Snow in March. And let's see, Cheryl's got snow. No, yeah, wow. Okay, and here in North Georgia, we don't know what. It was a while ago, as we looked out the window, the sun was shining and it was raining at the same time. So there you go. Guess we need to go look for a rainbow, but we'll do that later. All right, we want to get started as everybody's coming in. Folks are getting together, and I like that. So we'll get started as we usually do before. Let me do the housekeeping thing again for those folks who are not studio insiders. Anybody can participate, can listen. Studio insiders are the ones who've paid membership, who have a paid membership, and they're the ones who ask the questions. And as I said so many times before, we only do that so that we can manage the number of questions that come in. That decision was after we'd had our very first live chat, and we found we had more questions than we could even view. That we just go just like that. So having the members be the one to ask questions is a little extra perk for them, as well as it makes it possible to do. And also, if you're not a studio insider and you'd like to be a member of this exclusive little club, just click on join. It's $4.99 every month. That's automatically deducted from your Google account or whatever, however they do that. And you get other perks too. Every month, a studio insider gets a free video lesson from the lessons website, DianneMize.com. And then also every month you get a special little snippet, a little what you might call a little jewel of wisdom. And let's see, oh yes, and then members ask questions in the live chat. My chat went away, Roger. Yeah. Okay. Okay, all right. So whenever Roger, are you ready now for us to start?
We have about 46, 50, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so here's the way it goes, and all of you who are regulars know this. We begin with a video that I've put together for you ahead of time that explains whatever ideas we're discussing on during a particular chat. So today's topic is edges, and I put together a little video for you to show you about how the edges and what they're all about. So Roger, if you're ready, by the way, yeah, do have your questions ready to ask after the video finishes. We see them a lot easier, a lot better if you wait until after the video is finished, and then we'll get into discussion and see what you have for us. Okay? Are you ready, Roger?
Let's go.
All right, roll that video. An edge is a boundary where one thing ends and another begins. There are 5 major kinds of edges: sharp, sfumato, blurred, lost, and textured. We use edges to give expression to our work and also to give our work clarity. Richard Schmid was a master at using edges. In his book Alla Prima 2, he says, think of them as visual poetry oozing from your brush. He also says he thinks of them as the musical part of painting, where the softer edges are like the softer passages of music, and the sharper edges are like the fortissimo, the strong, succinct passages of music. We can really feel that when we look at all the softer passages in this painting of the graveyard, and we compare that with his expression of flowers in this painting. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. Let's begin with the lost edge. The lost edge is an edge that totally disappears between one change and another. It could be between one shape and another, or it could be between one color and another. So look right here, where the greens gradually merge into the oranges, gradually merge into the shape of this tombstone. A lot of times people will think they've got to put all the edges in. And when you do that, it sort of flattens out your painting. But when you create a lost edge, such as that, the eye flows from one area to the other without stopping. And you can see the difference in how your eye behaves when you allow it to move through that as compared to, well, come over here. This is not a lost edge. This is a sharp edge. And you see how there is a distinct stop there between this dark value and this light value, and also the dark value defining her garment, the light value defining her skin. So you can see how he would think of this as very soft music, even a hum, where music flows gently and one passage sort of eases into another. We can find it, we can move throughout his painting, and we can find those lost edges throughout. We can see them right in here. We can see where he's done a similar thing right down here in this tombstone. We can also see what he's done right up here, where this passage just flows right through the light of that tree. No distinct edge between those. And as you move throughout, you can see he's done it right here, where he's really, really softened. Well, this is more like a blurred edge right here. But we can see that throughout. This is something to really pay attention to when you're painting, finding ways to actually lose edges. The more edges you can lose without losing the definition of your painting, the more musical or poetic or expressive your painting can be. Now let's go from the lost edge to the blurred edge. Now the blurred edge is one that simply blurs, where one edge blurs into the other, but you can still feel the edge. Now we can see a blurred edge right up in here. And if you move around, we see a blurred edge right here. We go on, we see a blurred edge right here. He uses blurred edges throughout, but I just want to point those. Now this one tends to be a little bit on the lost side here, but now we can look for edges to have a continuum, just like other elements of painting do, where something might be bordering on being lost and blurred. So the important thing is that we find ways to use those. Here's an example right here. Here's an example of where edges almost get lost, but they're blurred in such a way that the images visually blend one into the other. See lots of really lost and blurred going on in here, in these areas. Around the hair is a wonderful place to blur edges, blur and lose edges. A lot of times people make distinct edges there where there's hair meeting the skin of the face, and it just looks like a nasty wig. Same thing is true in foliage. You can see what he's done here. Push that foliage back by blurring the edges of the foliage. Let's go from the blurred edge now to the sfumato edge. Now, sfumato is something that's given credit to Leonardo because we think he was the first painter in our Western history to discover how to very slightly blur the edge of a positive shape with a negative shape so that you could feel the atmosphere around it. And they refer to that as sort of a smoky atmosphere. But it's just a matter of instead of creating the really crisp, sharp edge, you create an edge where you can actually just sort of get a very slight blend of the edge. Well, and this is really interesting. We can see a slight little blend of the edge right here. And you see it gets a little bit sharper right here. And we can see also now I can move from that and talk about the textured edge, because textured edges do all those things. Textured edges, except for being lost, you can't really lose a textured edge. But a textured edge would vary. Sometimes be very sharp, sometimes have more of the atmospheric edge, barely blended, sometimes blended to a blur. And we've got textured edges right here. We have that feeling of textured edges right here. You see as right in here as the foliage overlaps the tombstones there. And we always have textured edges around foliage. And they, too, you can see it's textured, the edges irregular, textured, but we're blended and blurred to various degrees. You see that, feel that right up in here. Feel it in here, the textured edge a little bit more in these areas right here. See it in here. And as you come on down, you can see edges of grass are textured. But you see what he's done there? He's blurred those. He's blurred it so that the eye flows through it more smoothly. Now, when we do that, the edges that are sharper, if you'll notice, will get more tension, like a loud sound in an orchestra. Back to music again, such as this. Your eye goes here. It's not just the sharpness of the edge there, also it's the value contrast. But those two go together. The stronger the value contrast, in other words, the lighter the light on the light side of the contrast and the darker the dark on the dark side of the contrast, the sharper you can make that edge appear. And so an edge will feel very, very sharp there, where the artist has actually made it sharp, and maybe not quite so sharp right here where there's a really, really close value contrast that you can barely see the difference between the edge of the sleeve and the background stuff right there. So that's just picking and choosing a few things that Schmid has used here in this painting for edges. Now I want to go now to Bouguereau. Bouguereau's work is much more defined than Schmid's, but I want you to notice how he's used edges in this little piece, the little knitter. And I want you to call your attention to the hair, first of all, because I was talking about that in the Schmid piece. You see how soft those edges are? And in some places, the edges almost get lost. That is something to really pay attention to when you're doing portrait work, that you don't just give a really hard edge right there where the hair comes around. At least give it sfumato, if not a slight blur. And we give those blurs by blending. And also the outside edges of the hair. Notice how they are slightly blurred. And in some places, well, they are mostly just blurred. A little bit of sfumato, a little sharper right here, but you still feel that kind of atmospheric, a slight blend there. Now, where the hair goes out into space, like here, you see it gets really blurred. It gets more blurred as it goes out into space and almost lost. So there's a good place where a painter who is more, who wants his shapes more defined, more clearly defined throughout, Associate Bourgeois was doing, as opposed to the way Schmid worked with his edges, you'll find lots and lots of sfumato, lots of really closely blend, very barely blend edges, and sometimes you'll find them a little sharper, like right here. But I want you to, let's move around in here, and you can see right down in this area right here where he's got this shadow area almost lost as it blends out. Look at these areas back in here. He's made these edges more sfumato edges, but he's got the change in color there that is really what defines this foliage, because if you squint, you'll see how very similar in value these positive areas are as compared to the negative areas around them. You see right in here, when you squint, the negative blends into the positive. Now that is almost lost because of the blur between there. And that's something else we can do when we've got something behind where we want to put some color or want to indicate some vegetation. We can get those degrees of value closer. So it can still be blurred and it still can be lost, but we have to do just a little bit more work to get it to happen that way. Let's stop now and give you a chance to ask your questions. Alrighty, I'm ready for questions. Okay, I'm ready now for questions. I think I started talking too soon. Ready for questions about, is there anything now about edges that stimulated a question for you? Or was there anything that I explained there that you didn't understand? I took a slightly different labeling system for what we normally call the labeling of edges. I've all my life, all my training, not all my life, all my training, I heard the terms of sharp, soft, rough, of course, the term loss has been pretty consistent all the way across. But then I began to see that there were more variations on edges, and it occurred to me that we really have a clearer terminology with distinguishing sharp from sfumato and distinguishing blurred from sfumato and distinguishing lost from blurred, but also just calling the other edges textured, because I've heard them call zigzag and rough and all kinds of stuff, but to any edge that's textured. So that's my grouping of that terminology. Cheryl says, Schmid uses so many variations in edges, particularly in the foreground of his paintings, never looked unfinished. Why is that? When I try it many times, it just looks jumbled and unfinished. Well, Cheryl, study how he does that. He does have enough of the sharp edges in the areas of emphasis that he doesn't really need to put the finishing edges or the sharper edges on the stuff in the foreground. In the foreground, if you'll notice what your eye is doing, and this is true in almost any Schmid work you look at, especially the landscapes. It's more, I think he's doing that more in landscapes than his still life paintings are. He's playing with edges in a different way usually than he is in landscape paintings. But if you'll notice what your eye is doing, your eye will go to where his emphasis, his strongest emphasis is, and then you can start examining it. But the reason it fits and it works so well is because he has used those degrees of sharpening of edges only very strategically, only where he wants them very, very clear, and then he's very adroit at making them a little softer where he doesn't want them to be quite so in focus. So it just makes your eye go right to, and then allows our heads, our brains, to not miss all the other stuff. So try that approach to it. And also, you'll notice that he has a very clear value contrast, value and color contrast, where he does have those edges more strongly defined. So go back and look at them again in from the point of view of not just the areas where he's used the blurred edges, and especially in the foreground, but also how he has used the where his emphasis is. I'm thinking also now. Well, there are numbers of them. You can go back. You've got a copy. I think you have a copy of Alla Prima 2. I tell you that Alla Prima 2 is worth having. It's an expensive little book, big book. It's a coffee table book, but it is chocked full of great information and clear information and sound information, as well as his as the photographs. The photographs of his work are just wonderful because he had control of them. So that's my take on Cheryl. It just could be that you can get it to work for you much better if you go back and look exactly the degree, and look, when we had that workshop on degrees of emphasis, look at the degrees of emphasis he places and how that plays such a large role in making those foreground unemphasized areas work. Okay, she says he is one of the few, if not only the one that really uses this variation like he does. Yes, he is a master of edges. You know, it's really interesting to me that we painters will latch on to certain characteristics that become more of our language, and more of our painting language. And you know, he describes, as I mentioned in the video, he describes edges in musical terms. He thinks of them as in music and poetry, music in poetic terms, and so that becomes a part of Schmidt's language. And I think his mastery of edges is one of the reasons why he continues to be one of those masterful painters that we keep going back to and appreciating. And I think he's going to really go down in history as a major master in the history of painting. Okay, serendipity, I won't call your real name. So highly contrasted edges draw one's eye more so than less contrasted edges, and this is used to guide the viewer's eye through the image. Is that right? Absolutely. You absolutely got it right. Notice what your eye does. It doesn't have to be in a painting. It really could be in almost any situation. But notice what how your eye behaves. Where the strong contrast is, where the sharp edges are, your eye is more attracted to those, and then your eye kind of glides. I like to think of the transitions, and it's like gradation, gradated edges, the smoother edges, the more the blurred edges, and maybe it's the sfumato edges, maybe not so much, because they act more in giving the emphasis, and their role in giving the emphasis. But I like to think of those as according to what the eye does. I like to think of the eye takes this, it takes this path, and we don't notice it because our registration of what we're seeing, what we're looking at, our registration is instantaneous. And so we don't really notice what our eyes are doing, what our attention is doing, unless we become conscious or aware of it. But if you kind of pay attention to that, you'll notice that the sharper edges get your attention and kind of stop you. They kind of act like a stop sign. And the softer edges, your attention kind of glides from them, from one softer edge to another, or one softer edge to another passage. And of course, the lost edges, your eye, they're just like a little road, It's like a road that maybe the road just kind of changes directions when it maybe changes color. It might, like I saw, I showed you in that one passage. But the lost edges, you're moving from one shape to the other, and you're just moving right into it without stopping at all. but it is the either the sfumato or the sharper edges that appear within shapes that enables us to identify them, and those cause our eye to stop and identify that as a shape. Whereas where the edge is lost, the eye just glides right through it, kind of like in an orchestra, just the sounds of a flowing instrument, a flowing violin, or whereas then there's a sudden interruption of another orchestral section, and that's more of a stop. I won't go too deep into that, but I just think it's fascinating. Penny asks, does this mean the edges define the composition? Edges, I'm sorry, Penny, edges play a large role in defining. Now remember the composition. Can I do a little clarifying there? A lot of people refer to composition as just how, initial placement of shapes and all like that. That's more than that. Every brush stroke you put down, every brush stroke you put in the painting is a part of the composing process. So you start out a general composition of placement. You start out with a general placement of shapes and values, but you are constantly composing those within the context of what you're doing as you're working. So the composition itself is not limited to a single what would you say, a single part of the process of painting. The composition is as you're working in a constant stage of development, a constant evolving into however it ends. And yes, edges then become very much a part of how the composition develops. So initially, when you're first placing shapes, probably not. You're not as conscious of edges when you're first placing the shapes, if that's what you're referring to, because you're pretty much arranging space to begin with when you first set up the painting. If you first set up the general initial composition of the painting, you are more concerned with how the shapes are arranged and how the values are going to be arranged. But as you get into the development of the painting, especially when you get more past if you go through the process of blocking and then refinement, more after you move out of blocking and in refinement is when edges really become important. Although they can become important during the blocking phase, and a lot of times in the way Schmidt worked, you'll notice, if you've ever seen videos of him working live, you'll notice a lot of times he's blocking in and refining at the same time, and he's aware of every brush stroke he makes and how that edge is being formed by what that brush stroke is doing. So you can see it's an evolving process. But as I said before, really the concern for edges comes after those initial phases of getting the general overall placement of images, and then the shaping of the values and colors of images. Then edges become important as you begin to pull everything together. All right, I hope I didn't confuse you too much on that. Serendipity. Okay, thank you so much for a meaningful explanation. Great. All right, you're welcome. Of course, you all know I love explaining. Mary Ellen, can you talk a bit more about the difference between blurred and sfumato edges? Yes. The sfumato edges are, you might call them a transition. Now this is my definition, but think about the sharpest edge you can think of. The abstractionists who, such as Mondrian and people who are working with really flat abstract shapes, used a lot of sharp edges. They use only, well, I wouldn't say only, but pretty much a lot of sharp edges when they were dealing with flat shapes, precise edges, dividing one shape from another, that sort of thing. That is sharp. The blurred edge is one that has the edge is slightly blurred. The edge of a positive shape is slightly blended into the edge of a negative shape, but you can still read it as an edge. A sfumato edge is in between those two. It's barely blurred. The sharpness of the edge is cut very slightly because it's a very subtle blur between the edge of the positive shape and going within the negative shape. And that's why I wanted to show you Brushwork, because he's working, the more classical painters are working more with the sfumato edge than they are any other edges, even though some of the other edges will enter into their work. But the more classical painters, I'm saying that very generally now, like Brushwork, are if you'll notice, the edges around the images, the edge around the little girl's face and her body and whatever, those edges are very slightly blended, very, very slightly blended. They're not just cut off sharply with the brush like that. Usually the technique for that is, if it's wet into wet, the technique for that is the brush brings the stroke in, wipe the brush off, and then pull it very gently over on top. And sometimes that's done with a softer brush, where you put the paint down, or one value of paint next to another, and then with a softer brush, very gently pull the brush between the two, and it just very gradually blends those edges. It becomes sfumato because it needs to feel, that makes it feel as if there is space, that it's in a three-dimensional space. And so that's how I would explain that. Penny, the no-10, thank you, that's clear, good. No-10 defines the composition more or less, and the edges help contribute to the story. That's a good way of saying it, yes. That's the way, and I think you understand that clearly. Probably don't need to elaborate, but you know well. The no-10, the no-10 tells us where, or the no-10 in my terms of how we use no-10. The no-10 tells us what the lights and shadows are doing. That's all it tells us. Nothing else. It just tells us what the lights and shadows are doing. It tells us where the areas are that are catching light rays, direct light rays, and the areas that are not, that they're being, where the light rays are being blocked. So it's just giving us a general pattern of light and shadow. And then as we begin to work into that, yes, the edges become a part, and I think you said it very well there, the edges help to contribute to the story. And they do. The edges actually can determine an awful lot about the story, because they're going to help put the emphasis in. So the sharper the edges, the stronger the emphasis. So you could take, say, two paintings of the same subject, and the edges can be emphasized, or the edges can be sharper in one area of one of those paintings, and then sharper in another area of the other painting, and you'll have two different stories of the same scene. So that's part of the creative interpretation of it the individuals give to work. Serendipity. Would it ever be wrong, in quotes, to use sharp edges throughout a piece? Might you have an example where hard edges throughout a piece might be desirable? Well, I'm not going to say that using hard and sharp, they're used interchangeably. I think that's a matter of perception. Some people prefer to say hard edges, and some prefer sharp. They mean the same thing, and you did that there. Nevertheless, I'm not going to say wrong, but I'm going to say that where the equal emphasis needs to be, where the artist wants the equal emphasis placed throughout, then the edges will be consistently sharp throughout. And we have some of that in the history of painting. See if I can bring something up in my head right away. We do have it in the abstract era, the abstract and expressionist era, abstract more so than an expressionist, not necessarily an expressionist era, but in the abstractionist movement, we had all kinds of different ways to abstract, and some of those had to do with edges, and some of those did use consistently the harder or the sharper edges throughout, and the where the arrangement of space became more important. Is Edward Harper an example of one that might use more sharp? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I can't pull anything off the top of my head right now. But I'm not going to say no. No, I'm saying it's the way you use them, and what I'm trying to communicate to you is be aware of how you're using them, because a lot of people think that all painting is about is just copying images and not paying any attention to how the image is expressed. Well, the edge is expressing something about the image, and how that gets expressed is giving the interpretation to the whole painting, and specifically to the image of the painting. So I hope I didn't make that too. I hope that answered you. If it didn't, let me know and we'll give it another go. Cheryl, Roger's got some examples over here. Norman Rockwell, he's a good example. He's a good example. Well, is that got any greens in it?
No.
No, these are vignettes. The magazine illustrators used a lot of the sharper edges, but Rockwell's work, Roger happens to have it right here, and you can see that these are vignettes, but you can see in this case, you see it works. It really works, and you can see as I'll get my hand out of the way there. Which one is it? Is this one? You can see there. It's because, but if you'll notice, his values are kept closer. Where you notice he's got stronger value contrast where he wants the stronger attention. You notice the variation in values was his main tool to work with. But yes, Rockwell's work is a good example of pretty consistently using the sharper edges. Yeah, good, Roger. Excellent. Now you want to take this? Right, wonderful. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought of that, but then yes, there are though, and the illustrators, especially the illustrators in Rockwell's generation, were wonderful composers, but because of the fact that they were illustrating, the purpose was to illustrate the story with images. The purpose was giving attention to the images themselves. Then you'll find pretty consistent of the sharper or harder edges. Maybe some sfumato in there, but yeah. Okay, Cheryl, could you please talk a little more about why you can't really have a lost textured edge? Oops. Does this have to do with texture being tiny value differences? Yes, well, we usually we think of, if say a textured edge, something like a jagged piece of wood that we're showing in a drawing or painting, or the sharp edges of grasses or something like that. Once it gets lost, a lost edge is one in which the values themselves or the colors themselves blend so evenly from one area into another that we can't actually tell the difference of where one area begins and another ends and another area begins. And so you can see textures. No, it's not really doing that in the background there. Yeah, it kind of is. Right over here, right over there. See. All right, so you see how this gets more lost right here. It loses the textured feel. It loses the textured feel to it the more blended it gets. And so it's the blend that creates that smooth gradation from either dark to light, a smooth gradation. The lost edge is impossible without a smooth gradation, or a relatively smooth gradation. So that The more it's blended, which is how we do lost edges, the more texture disappears. And so that's about as close, I guess, as I can come at the moment to make that clear. Did that do it, Cheryl? Let me know. Let's see. I just wondered if any of you happen to think, yeah, oh, great. Okay, it made perfect sense. It takes a moment. Once you write stuff, it takes a moment for us to see it. So I'm glad you answered that. Good, because sometimes I'm not sure if I was just rambling or if it's actually making sense. I just wondered if any of you were or thought of any examples of going back to the serendipitous question. If you, any other examples of actually recognized artists and painters in history that made functional use of those harder edges. All right, so now we got Mary. I sometimes struggle when to use soft versus hard edges. If I'm understanding, I should use hard edges to bring more focus. That's it. That's it. Where you want now. Remember there is a continuum here. The harder edges, the harder the edge, the more in focus it is. And the more in focus you want it to be, then that's one way to get that focus. And you're absolutely right. That's it. The price behind you is filled with, the piece behind you is filled with all kinds of edges. You're absolutely right. That's why Roger chose that. He always chooses the piece behind me. And that's why he chose that one, is because you see it has in it it has every kind of edge I named. It has in the piece here. Yeah, and that's a really good example. You can do that with a camera too, by the way. This is a photograph. This is a photograph, isn't it? Yeah. Is this one you took, or is this one you?
No.
This one you lifted. It was a donation from some source, right?
All right.
Yeah. But it's a wonderful thing. You can do that with the camera by the the more telephoto. I mean, the more what's it called? The more open the aperture of the camera. We used to do this in the old days before the digital cameras. Focal what?
Focal length.
Focal length is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. The aperture, with more wide open the aperture is, the more in focus in front, and the more blurred the edges will be in the distance. And the smaller the aperture is, the more it's in focus. And you can play with that with your camera too. Guess what I'm saying? Well, look at what Serendipity is. He gave us this tip. We can go get a hamburger after this.
Woo!
Yay! Your ability to respond, teach at a level even I can understand is truly a blessing. Well, thank you. My goodness, that gives me chills. Thank you so much. Calling me by name is perfectly fine. Kevin! Thank you, Kevin. That was sweet. Yeah, that did give me chills. Get a good way. All right, let's see. What else have we got there? Does that mean that you have all the questions that you... Have we answered all the questions about edges? I would really be interested to see some results of the discussion. All you got to do is drop me an email, and I may be asking for trouble on this one, but I really, really do enjoy seeing results. And so, if bringing edges to your consciousness and their uses and how wonderful, what a difference they can make in your painting, if you end up with something where that difference is made, just send me a copy. I'm not going to do any critiquing now. That would get out of hand. But just send me a copy and let me see what you did. Roger?
I have a question.
Yeah, Roger.
Can you use different hues to create a sharper or
Yes,
softer?
that's a good, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, you can. Color, he's asking if you can use different hues to create different edges. Yes, you can. For example, you could have maybe, and this is what Mondrian was doing. You could have a yellow, against a blue that are the same value, but at a very sharp edge, you would see that distinction. Even though they're the same value, you would see the distinction of the hue between them because of that sharp edge. Yeah, and then you could have all the edges can be also created with different, not just different values, but different hues as well. Isn't that more fun than a barrel of monkeys? I never thought monkeys were that much fun anyway, but I probably got myself in trouble by saying that. I probably shouldn't badmouth monkeys.
I used to play that game. We had the barrel.
Oh.
You put it and you hook them together.
Oh, you did?
And you made a big string of monkeys hooked together.
Is that what a barrel of monkeys is?
That was a barrel.
Did y'all hear?
It was a game.
Did y'all know that Roger played a game called Barrel of Monkeys? Well, how many edges were? Never mind. Never mind what I always thought. I think probably what everybody else thought. So I never thought about it really. I mean, we hear these terms and we don't think about. Oh, Mary Ellen remembers that game.
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Anybody else ever played Barrel of Monkeys? Cheryl. Even though she's back to the topic. Even though you said edges are identified mostly during the refining stage, wouldn't you, pardon me, wouldn't you need an idea of what you want to keep de-emphasized at the beginning? I think so, Cheryl. But you know, sometimes I'll get into a painting and think, what I want to de-emphasize. But as the painting develops, I'll discover by giving that thing more emphasis, the painting's going to be richer. Or, you know, it's kind of like when I've heard novel, I've never written a novel in my life and couldn't I probably could if I wanted to, but I don't want to write a novel. But let me tell you, I've heard novelists talk about how their work will develop, that in a first draft, they will see they'll see a need for a character to be a foil to one of the characters they developed, and so they will add that character in to the as the thing develops. In other words, oftentimes as an artist, part of the artistic process is that you can start out with an idea. Sometimes that idea will develop exactly like you perceive it in the beginning, but many times as the thing itself is in process of being developed or created, you will discover, as you're watching it, you discover other things that can happen as a result of what's already happened there. And that's a very general thing I just said, I know, but for that reason, you have an idea of what you want to emphasize in the block-in stages, yes, but always give yourself that opportunity to switch to respond to what you've done, and if you want that emphasis to be elsewhere, then put it there. And that's what I mean when I say listen to the painting, let the painting guide you. Welcome, Carol. Carol Medford just joined the Studio Insiders, and welcome, Barbara Wang. Wow, we got 2 new members right here while we're in the midst of this discussion. Well, maybe we should have discussions about edges more often. Barbara asked, I have binge watched so many of your quick tips. As a beginning painter, you're a treasure of a teacher. Well, thank you. Well, I just got chilled skin. My goodness. I'm not going to be worth living with once this is over. Thanks, Barbara. I appreciate that a whole lot. Just have fun with it. It is I don't know if anything's more fun. Can you talk about brush strokes in creating edges? Yeah, there's a discussion within itself, Terry. That's Terry asking the question. All right. Brush strokes. Some people like to hide their brush strokes behind them as they go. Brushwork, for example. Brushwork's brush strokes are pretty much hidden, if not as he goes, somewhere within the area of the painting. But painters, and that's perfectly fine. So in the case of a style of painting where you're camouflaging your brush strokes as you go. In other words, the actual brush strokes are not taking active participation in the how can I say this? In the interpretation of the painting, but they're controlling what happens there. Whereas Sargent, and Schmid and others, to them the brushstroke was very much a part of the expression of the painting. And then what happens then is that the brushstroke acts as a shape maker, where the way the brush moves and the speed with which the brush moves, the way the brush is loaded, the amount of pressure that's put on the canvas, all those things participate in the interpretation of the expressive characteristic or quality of the work itself. That's when the artist is paying very close attention to each brush stroke, the kind of edge or edges those brush strokes are making. And from that point, whether those end up being more of the sharper edges or the more sfumato or more blended, more blurred, lost texture, all those things happen as a result of what the brush is doing, the activity of the brush itself. So let's see, can you several areas hard edges? Did I answer that? I don't know if I answered that. So yes, a study, the best way to understand or to see in reality, and then maybe then to experience how brushstrokes participate in the forming of edges, is go look at some of those Sargent pieces, even some of those really dated portraits he did. If you look at how the fabrics are formed, if you were there, if you could ever see those things in real life, if you ever go to a museum or a gallery where they have a Sargent collection or have some of Sargent's work on exhibit, go as close as the guard will let you get to the painting and look at those brushstrokes. They are really visible. It's really visible then how he moved, the way he moved that brushstroke helped create the kind of edge that was the result of that movement. And so it ends up being that the brush is much more active player in the expressiveness of the work than the brush is a player in works that are created in the manner of bourgeois. Bourgeois' work is more about mastering other characteristics of technique and so on. So I hope I made that clear. I never know if I made them clear. Cheryl, I love that part. Part of the process is letting the painting tell me what it wants, needs throughout the painting itself. Absolutely. I'm sorry, Sasha. I scared Sasha. We've had some thunderstorms lately, and she's already a little bit wary anyway. So, all right. Barbara, do broken colors qualify as a certain kind of edge? Yes, because broken colors are going to create edges. They end up creating little textures. And, well, I guess maybe it depends. It depends on the stroke of the broken color. It depends on whether the eye is going to interpret that as the different, say, if you've got the broken strokes going on, are they broken to the point that the eye is going to read them as little tiny shapes, or is the eye going to read them as forming a part of a single shape? So to some degree, that's going to happen, the broken strokes. And there again, I'm speaking very generally because artists use these things in so many different ways that the best way to sort of see how that can work is to go to an artist's work and just look at the edges and how they're formed. And those people that use lots of broken brush strokes, look at the breaks in those strokes. Broken means they are breaks in the strokes. Look at those breaks in those strokes and see what are they actually doing? What are they actually creating? How important are the edges there in the degree of the character of the edges? That's what we've been talking about today anyways, the character of edges. So, okay. I'm sorry, Barbara, but I see what happened there. Do broken colors, we already answered that. Yeah. What are broken colors, Mary Helen? Just that. It's broken strokes, broken brush strokes, usually what they're talking about. She called it broken colors. Okay, same thing. It's the same thing. Where the color itself, instead of being continuous, is broken up. The Impressionists did a lot of broken color. If you look at the Impressionist work, a lot of broken color where if there'll be two colors side by side, that's one way. Two colors side by side, slightly different when the eye blends those into a single color. And the pointillists, the ones that use those tiny little points of color, they especially are indicative of what broken color can do. So if say for creating for the Impressionists and the pointillists to create green, one way would be to use blue and yellow strokes of the same color, and they put those strokes side by side. And sometimes in random placements, the pointillists would be a little bit more specific in their placement. As you stand back, those strokes blend into color. You walk up and you're standing close in front of it. It looks like a jumble, just a jumble of stuff. But as you stand back, it comes into focus, and your eyes perceive it all together. Then, and your eyes blend it into the color, the new color, in that case. So, all right. Olinda, did I pronounce your name correctly? Olinda? Are the different colors and values in the painting behind you? No, I'm reading that wrong. Are the different colors and values in the painting behind you be an example of what you're describing? Yes, it's a photo actually behind me. But yeah, that's the wonderful example of what we've been discussing. Cheryl, did Monet use broken color? Yes, he did. As part of what he did, all the Impressionists used broken color. Part of what they were doing was applying broken color, applying the principle of broken color, of the colors being visually mixed rather than physically mixed. It's what it's all about, where the colors are visually mixed instead of physically mixed, so that the different colors placed side by side will visually blend into a third color. So yes, Monet did use broken color. Thanks to yellows and yes. Thank you so much. Great clarification to use. Okay, folks, guess what time it is? We gotta go. Thank you so much for joining us. All of you have some great questions. You kept me talking for a full hour. That's pretty good. Well, maybe for a full hour. Fair warning, says Kevin. I'm getting closer to hiring you for another session. I am ready, Kevin. Let her fly. Eve, you're so easy to learn from. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, Eve. You know I love doing this. So thank you all for joining me. Join us next month. Hopefully, all the equipment and software will be in top-notch shape, and we won't have a glitch again like we did last Sunday. So we just continue to move forward. Okay, everybody, go out and do wonders with your art, and I look forward to seeing you later. Bye-bye for now. Thank you. Oh, there's Elaine.